Good morning. This is Pastor Marvin Osborne with First Baptist Church of Birmingham, Ohio, and I hope you're well today. Well, this week we've been talking about temptation, right? And how we all struggle with it, that all that is common to all of us. But even though it's common, that's not an excuse. And that all of us are responsible before God to not sin, to be holy as He is holy. And we know that temptation, although not a sin in and of itself, certainly will lead to sin if you do not escape from it, if you do not run from it, if you do not set guards up to protect yourself from it. It's like playing with matches. Maybe you with your kids, remember those old matchbooks, and you'd play with the matches and play with the matches, and you'd get away with it once or twice, but that third time you'd burn your finger with it, right? And or you accidentally light something on fire. The consequences associated with temptation, which leads to sin, are very real. And it's like knowing that there's a cliff there, and our goal is not to see how close we can get to the cliff before we fall over, because once you fall over, you found where the edge of the cliff is, but there's no going back because you're over the side. The same is true with sin and temptation. And we need to stay away from that edge as far as we can. We're looking at 1 Corinthians 10:13. It says, "There hath no temptation taken you, but such is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that which you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it." 1 Corinthians 10:13. We said that, temptation wants to overcome you. It wants to overwhelm you. That God has provided a way of escape. We did a comparison between Joseph and David, how Joseph ran from, but David seemingly ran too. Brought the woman from her bath into his home, and ultimately committed adultery with her. And we all know the consequences of that action. It cost David dearly, didn't he? And the same is true for all of us. What's the old saying, that sin will take you further than you wanted to go and cost you more than what you were wanting to pay? And that's certainly true, that Satan promises something, but he never lets you know what's on the other side of giving into that temptation. It's going to cost you something. And so today and tomorrow I want to talk maybe about the trigger effects how we can triumph over temptation. Today I want to talk about that trigger effect, that idea of knowing who we are, to be self-aware, to not candy coat or cover up our true proclivities. The fact is that you have proclivities and I have proclivities. Yours might be lust, and it may be pornography, or it may be covetousness, or it may be any number of things. And the fact is, we all have that. It doesn't matter if you got saved for last month or you've been saved for the last 6 decades. We all are tempted in certain ways. And so to understand what those buttons are, remember I talked about that idea of that 10 o'clock on a Friday night. Men are, that's when most Christian men are alone in front of their computer. Their spouse is not in the room, and the temptation to go into those websites they shouldn't go into. And the answer is don't get on your computer at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. Stay with your wife. Find other activities to do. And chances are you're not going to commit that sin. Don't put yourself in a place where you can be tempted. That's why I don't do any counseling with women in my office by myself. I'm not in this church with a woman alone. If they are, they're on the other side of the building. I'm here in my office with the door locked, and because not only do I don't want to be tempted, but number two, I don't want people to even think that their pastor is doing anything wrong. So I don't want to even have the appearance of impropriety going on in our life. So we need to know what our proclivities are. We need to examine ourselves to find out what our sin is. What's the thing that trips you up over and over again? Is it gossip? Is it anger? Is it pornography? Is it theft? Is it alcohol? Is it drug? Whatever it is. I think the first step of overcoming temptation is to know yourself. What is it about you that makes you stumble and fall over and over again, that begetting sin? And if you identify what the sin is, now you have to go back and say, what causes me to be tempted to commit that sin? Is there like that 10 o'clock on a Friday night with men and pornography? Is there a certain person? Is there a certain activity? Whatever it is, you and only you can identify. Ask God to reveal it to you what those activities are, and then obviously at that point you want to separate yourself. Wouldn't it have been great? What would the story have been if David, he wasn't in sin when he saw this woman out there bathing in public, which he shouldn't have been doing. If he had turned away and closed his window and not gone back to the window, he would not have sinned, right? What would have been how different would that story have turned out? It would have been an amazing story. This black mark in his life would not be there, and the same is true for you and I. I wonder how many times we thwarted God's blessing in our life because we've given in to something that we should have stayed away from in the first place. Just be wise. Certain people you don't need to be around. Certain activities you don't need to do. It doesn't matter if everybody's going out and they're just going to celebrate and you say, well, I'm just going to have a ginger ale and I'm not going to drink with everybody else. But you get there and the temptation's there, and you have one and you have two, and all of a sudden you've fallen off the wagon or whatever it is, and you've been tempted to do something else that you shouldn't do. That idea of just staying away. If David had just run like Joseph did, his story would have been different. And maybe that's true as well. So today I want you to maybe take some time to look at you. What is it about you that causes you to sin? And then figure out what it is, and maybe there's certain times, day, people, activities, whatever, that causes you to sin. Because you and I have a responsibility before God and before others to not give in to that temptation. And we'll pick back up here tomorrow. This is Pastor Marvin Osborne saying God loves you, and I love you as well, and I'll talk to you soon.